Solid wastes. Solid waste refer to everything that goes out in trash. Municipal solid waste are waste from homes, offices, stores, schools, hospitals, etc. that are collected and disposed by the municipality. The municipal solid wastes generally comprise paper, food wastes, plastics, glass, metals, rubber, leather, textile, etc. Burning reduces the volume of the wastes, although it is generally not completely burned to completion, and open dumps often serve as the breeding ground for rats and flies. Sanitary landfills were adopted as the substitute for open burning dumps. In a sanitary landfill, wastes are dumped in a depression or trench after compaction and covered with dirt every day. Landfills are also not really much of solution since the amount of garbage generation, especially in the metros, have increased so much that these sites are getting filled too. Also, there is danger of seepage of chemicals, etc. from these landfills polluting the underground water resources. A solution to all this can only be in human beings becoming more sensitive to these environmental issues. All waste that we generate can be categorized into three types. First, biodegradable, second, recyclable, and third, the non biodegradable. It is important that all garbage generated is sorted. What can be reused or recycled should be separated out. Our kabadiwalas and rag pickers do a great job of separation of materials for recycling. The biodegradable materials can be put into deep pits in the ground and be left for natural breakdown. That leaves only the non biodegradable to be disposed of. The need to reduce our garbage generation should be prime goal. Instead, we are increasing the use of non biodegradable products. Just pick any ready-made packet of any good quality eatable, say a biscuit packet, and study the packaging. Do you see the number of protective layers used? Note that at least one layer is of plastic. We have started packaging even our daily use product like milk and water in polybags. In cities, fruits and vegetables can be bought packed in beautiful polystyrene and plastic packaging. We pay so much, and what do? Contribute heavily to environmental pollution. State governments across the country are trying to push for reduction in use of plastics and use of eco-friendly packaging. We can do our bit by carrying cloth or other natural fiber carry bag when we go shopping and by refusing polythene bags. Hospitals generate hazardous waste that contain disinfectants and other harmful chemicals, and also pathogenic microorganisms. Such waste also require careful treatment and disposal. The use of incinerators is crucial to dispose of hospital waste. Irreparable computers and other electronic goods are known as electronic wastes, e-wastes. E-waste are buried in landfills or incinerated. Over half of the e-waste generated in the developed world are exported to developing countries, mainly to China, India, and Pakistan, where metals like copper, iron, silicon, nickel, and gold are recovered during recycling process. Unlike developed countries which have specifically built facilities for recycling e-waste, recycling in developing countries often involves manual participation, thus exposing workers to toxic substances present in e-waste. Recycling is the only solution to the treatment of e-waste, provided it is carried out in an environmental friendly manner. Case study of remedy for plastic waste. A plastic sack manufacturer in Bangalore has managed to find the ideal solution to ever increasing problem of accumulating plastic waste. Ahmad Khan, aged 57 years old, has been producing plastic sacks for 20 years. About 8 years ago, he realized that plastic waste was a real problem. Polyblend, a fine powder of recycled modified plastic, was developed then by his company. This mixture is mixed with the bitumen that is used to lay roads. In collaboration with RV College of Engineering and the Bangalore City Corporation, Ahmad Khan proved that Blends of polyethylene and bitumen, when used to lay roads, enhance the bitumen's water repellent properties and help to increase the road life by a factor of 3. The raw material for creating polyblend is any plastic film waste. So, against the price of rupees 0.40 per kg that rag pickers had been getting for plastic waste, Khan now offers rupees 6. Using Khan's technique, by the year 2002, more than 40 kilometers of road in Bangalore has been laid. At this rate, Khan will soon be running short of plastic waste in Bangalore. To produce polyblend, thanks to innovations like polyblend, we might still avoid being smothered by plastic waste. Agrochemicals and their effects. In the wake of green revolution, use of inorganic fertilizers and pesticides has increased the manifold for enhancing crop production. Pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, etc. are increasingly used. These, incidentally, are also toxic to non-target organisms that are important components of the soil ecosystem. Do you think these can be biomagnified in the terrestrial ecosystem? We know what the addition of increasing amount of chemical fertilizers can do to aquatic ecosystem eutrophication. The current problems in agriculture are therefore extremely grave. A case study of organic farming. Integrated organic farming is a cyclical zero waste procedure where waste products from one process are recycled in as nutrients for other processes. This allows the maximum utilization of resource and increases the efficiency of production. Ramesh Chandra Dagar, a farmer in Sonipat, Haryana, is doing just this. He includes beekeeping, dairy management, water harvesting, composting, and agriculture in a chain of processes which support each other and allow an extremely economical and sustainable venture. This is no need to use chemical fertilizers for crops as cattle excreta dungs are used as manure. Crop waste is used to create compost which can be used as a natural fertilizer or can be used to generate natural gas for satisfying the energy feeds of the farm. Enthusiastic about spreading information and help on the practice of integrated organic farming, Dagar has created the Haryana Kisan Welfare Club with the current membership of 5,000 farmers. Radioactive wastes. Initially, nuclear energy was hailed as a non-polluting way for generating electricity. Later on, it was realized that the use of nuclear energy has two very serious inherent problems. The first is accidental linkage as occurred in the 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl incident, and the second is safe disposal of radioactive wastes. Radiation that is given off by nuclear waste is extremely damaging to organisms because it causes mutations at a very high rate. At high doses, nuclear radiation is lethal, but at lower doses, it creates various disorders, the most frequent of all being cancer. Therefore, nuclear waste is an extremely potent pollutant and has to be dealt with utmost caution. It has been recommended that storage of nuclear waste after sufficient pre-treatment should be done in suitably shielded containers buried within the rocks, about 500 meter deep below the Earth's surface. However, this method of disposal is meeting stiff opposition from the public. Greenhouse effect and global warming. The term greenhouse effect has been derived from a phenomenon that occurs in a greenhouse. Have you ever seen a greenhouse? It looks like a small house and is used for growing plants, especially during winter. In a greenhouse, the glass panel lets the light in but does not allow heat to escape. Therefore, the greenhouse warms up very much like inside a car that has been parked in the sun for a few hours. The greenhouse effect is a naturally occurring phenomenon that is responsible for heating of Earth's surface and atmosphere. You would be surprised to know that without the greenhouse effect, the average temperature of the Earth's surface would be a chilly -18 degrees Celsius rather than the present average of 15 degrees Celsius. In order to understand the greenhouse effect, it is necessary to know the fate of energy of sunlight that reaches the outermost atmosphere. Clouds and gases reflect about one fourth of the incoming solar radiation and absorb some of it, but almost half of incoming solar radiation falls on Earth's surface, heating it, while a small proportion is reflected back. Earth's surface re-emits heat in the form of infrared radiation, but part of this does not escape into space as atmospheric gases, example CO2 and methane, etc., absorb a major fraction of it. The molecules of these gases radiate heat energy, and a major part of which again comes to Earth's surface, thus heating it up once again. This cycle is repeated many a times. The above mentioned gases, carbon dioxide and methane, are commonly known as greenhouse gases because they are responsible for the greenhouse effect. Increase in the level of greenhouse gases has led to considerable heating of Earth, leading to global warming. During the past century, the temperature of the Earth has increased by zero point 0.6 degrees Celsius, most of it during the last 3 decades. Scientists believe that this rise in temperature is leading to deleterious changes in the environment and resulting in odd climatic changes. Example, El Nino effect, thus leading to increased melting of polar ice caps as well as of other places like Himalayan snow caps. Over many years, this will result in a rise in the sea level that can submerge many coastal areas. The total spectrum of changes that global warming can bring about is a subject that is still under active research. How can we control global warming? The measures include cutting down use of fossil fuels, improving efficiency of energy uses, reducing deforestation, planting trees, and slowing down the growth of human population. International initiatives are also being taken to reduce the emission of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. Ozone depletion in the stratosphere. You have earlier studied in the chemistry textbook of class 11 about bad ozone formed in the lower atmosphere, troposphere, that harms the plants and animals. There is good ozone also. This ozone is found in the upper part of the atmosphere called the stratosphere, and it acts as a shield absorbing ultraviolet radiation from the sun. UV rays are highly injurious to living organisms since DNA and proteins of living organisms preferentially absorb UV rays, and its high energy breaks the chemical bonds within these molecules. The thickness of the ozone in a column of air from the ground to the top of the atmosphere is measured in the terms of Dobson units. Ozone gas is continuously formed by the action of UV rays on molecular oxygen and also degraded into molecular oxygen in the stratosphere. There should be a balance between the production and degradation of ozone in the stratosphere. Of late, the balance has been disrupted due to enhancement of ozone degradation by chlorofluorocarbons CFCs. CFCs find wide use as refrigerants. CFCs discharged in the lower part of the atmosphere move upward and reach stratosphere. In the stratosphere, UV rays acts on them, releasing chlorine atoms. Chlorine degrades ozone, releasing molecular oxygen, with these atoms acting merely as catalysts. Chlorine atoms are not consumed in the reaction. Hence, whatever CFCs are added to the stratosphere, they have permanent and continuing effects on ozone levels. Although ozone depletion is occurring widely in the stratosphere, the depletion is particularly marked over the Antarctic region. This has resulted in formation of a large area of thinned ozone layer, commonly called as the ozone hole. UV radiation of wavelengths shorter than UVB are almost completely absorbed by Earth's atmosphere, given that the ozone layer is intact, but UVB damages DNA and mutation may occur. It causes aging of skin, damage to skin cells, and various types of skin cancers. In human eye, the cornea absorbs UVB radiation, and a high dose of UVB causes inflammation of cornea called snow blindness, cataract, etc. Such exposure may permanently damage the cornea. Recognizing the deleterious effects of ozone depletion, an international treaty known as the Montreal Protocol was signed at Montreal, Canada in 1987, effective in 1989 to control the emission of ozone depleting substances. Subsequently, many more efforts have been made and protocols have laid down definite roadmaps separately for developed and developing countries for reducing the emission of CFCs and other ozone depleting chemicals. Degradation by improper resource utilization and maintenance. The degradation of natural resources can occur not just by the action of pollutants but also by improper resource utilization practices, soil erosion, and desertification. The development of the fertile topsoil takes centuries, but it can be removed very easily due to human activities like overcultivation, unrestricted grazing, deforestation, and poor irrigation practices, resulting in arid patches of land. When large barren patches extend and meet over time, a desert is created. Internationally, it has been recognized that desertification is a major problem nowadays, particularly due to increased urbanization. Waterlogging and soil salinity. Irrigation without proper drainage of water leads to waterlogging in the soil. Besides affecting the crops, waterlogging draws salt to the surface of the soil. The salt then is deposited as a thin crust on the land surface or start collecting at the roots of the plants. This increased salt content is inimical to growth of crops and is extremely damaging to agriculture. Waterlogging and soil salinity are some of the problems that have come in the wake of the Green Revolution. Deforestation. Deforestation is the conversion of forested areas to non-forested ones. According to an estimate, almost 40% of forests have been lost in the tropics compared to only 1% in the temperate region. The present scenario of deforestation is particularly grim in India. At the beginning of the 20th century, forest covered about 30% of the land of the India. By the end of the century, it shrunk to 19.4%, whereas the National Forest Policy 1988 of India has recommended 33% forest cover the plains and 67% for the hills. How does deforestation occur? A number of human activities contribute to it. One of the major reasons is the conversion of forest to agricultural land so as to feed the growing human population. Trees are axed for timber, firewood, cattle ranching, and for several other purposes. Slash and burn agriculture, commonly called as jhum cultivation in the northeastern states of India, has also contributed to deforestation. In slash and burn agriculture, the farmers cut down the trees of the forest and burn the plant's remains. The ash is used as a fertilizer and the land is then used for farming or cattle grazing. After cultivation, the area is left for several years so as to allow its recovery. The farmers then move on to other areas and repeat this process. In earlier days, when jhum cultivation was in prevalence, enough time gap was given so that the land recovered from its effect of cultivation. With increasing population and repeated cultivation, this recovery phase is done away with, resulting in deforestation. What are the consequences of deforestation? One of the major effects is enhanced carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere because trees that could hold a lot of carbon in their biomass are lost with the deforestation. Deforestation also causes loss in biodiversity due to habitat destruction, disturbs hydrologic cycle, causes soil erosion and may lead to desertification in extreme cases. Reforestation is the process of restoring a forest that once existed but was removed at some point of time in the past. Reforestation may occur naturally in a deforested area. However, we can speed it up by planting trees with due consideration to biodiversity that earlier existed in that area. Case study of people's participation in conservation of forests. People participation has a long history in India. In 1731, the king of Jodhpur in Rajasthan asked one of his ministers to arrange wood for constructing a new palace. The minister and workers went to a forest near a village inhabited by Bishnois to cut down the trees. The Bishnoi community is known for its peaceful coexistence with nature. The effort to cut down the trees by the kings was thwarted by the Bishnois. A Bishnoi woman, Amrita Devi, showed exemplary courage by hugging a tree and daring king's men to cut her first before cutting the tree. The tree mattered much more to her own life. Sadly, the king's men did not heed the plates and cut down the tree along with Amrita Devi. Her three daughters and hundreds of other Bishnois followed her and thus lost their lives saving trees. Now, here in history, do we find a commitment of this magnitude when human beings sacrifice their life for the cause of the environment? The Government of India has recently instituted for Amrita Devi Bishnoi Wildlife Protection Award for individuals or communities from rural areas that have shown extraordinary courage and dedication in protecting wildlife. You may have heard of the Chipko movement of Grahwal Himalayas in 1974. Local women showed enormous bravery in protecting trees from the axe of the contractors by hugging them. People all over the world have acclaimed the Chipko movement. Realizing the significance of participation by local communities, the Government of India in 1980s has introduced the concept of joint forest management so as to work closely with the local communities for protecting and managing forests. In return for their services to the forest, the communities get benefit of various forest products, example fruits, gum, rubber, medicine, etc. and thus the forest can be conserved in a sustainable manner. Thank you very much.